I see the vast changes coming in on how we're going to need to grow our own foods, but then, looking at the nutrient content within the foods and, what's going to disappear out of the stores, what's going to get cheaper in the stores, what's going to get more available, and then how that's going to, really tweak people's health. And this is all going to happen in the next 12 months. So it's super relevant right now.
Absolutely. It's coming out in the press now. They're preparing people for it. But even I think it was the UN 2 years ago now said there was going to be a famine of biblical proportions. Might not have been quite that long ago. They've been telling everybody to do from the beginning, or they're telling everybody what they're going to do from the beginning, haven't they? All hidden in plain sight.
How are people going to keep themselves healthy as they change their diets and foods become less available, and they don't have the money to buy proper foods anymore, and people switch to junk because they can afford it and it's something that fills the belly? There's all kind of really kind of nasty things coming down the way that people's bodies are going to be so heavily affected by what they're putting in them to stay alive on. We're going back to primal instinct of staying alive by putting anything in the body. It wouldn't surprise me if they're going to eat the glue off the back of the wallpaper like they did in the siege of Leningrad.
Wow. Yes. Well, fun times ahead.
On a happier note, hello.
Hello.
And good afternoon, everyone. Today I have with me Clive De Carl. Now, as we move through these transitions here into the fertilizer shortages and less foods being grown, the hyperinflationary push on foods where people are going to start making a lot different choices on what they eat, what they put in their bodies, how's that going to affect nutrient intake? Because over here on Clive's site, clivedecarl.com, quote, there are only 3 reasons that we lose our health: physical damage, toxicity, and nutrient deficiency. No 4th reason. So pinging on this nutrient deficiency as people make choices to buy foods that might cost less because you need something to fill your belly, or we come to seasonal diets where things are just simply not available anymore. You're going to have to change your choice. And also when we grow foods, what types of foods would you want to grow with high chlorophyll, vitamin C, different vitamins, proteins, micronutrients? There's a gamut of things to think about moving through the transition from now, when things are still quite available in stores, into the point where it's going to be rationed by the end of the year at harvest season 2022. A lot of big statements in that. As through history, you find that with the famines and with the food shortages comes a lot of cognitive malfunctioning, is the best way to put it, where people aren't at their top because they're missing something that is making or allowing their brains to fire their bodies to work for the calories, to get that muscle mass to go in and plant food. So you see this continuous step down as the food and the calories start to diminish. Well, society does lockstep because everything's intertwined, but it's all about preparing and knowing what you need to keep your bodies functioning at optimum level, as the masses might go for cheaper foods that will also affect their bodies in general. So Clive, I appreciate you joining me today. I know your time is well spent, and how many tens of thousands of hours of research have you been into this, and some great solutions with Tesla technologies and ozone and many other things we can think about to make our lives bountiful and thriving during these times. We shouldn't have to sit in squalor and nibbling out of a can of tuna by yourself in a cold basement. That's not life. We need to step it up so we can thrive during these changes. So Clive, thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for all the research that you're doing as well. Probably like me, you're addicted and would do it anyway, whether you were paid to do it or, most of what I've learned has been just because I wanted to find out the answers to everything. Solutions obviously are what everybody needs right now, and they are all there. People greater than us have worked out the solutions to poverty, the solutions to everything a long time ago. So it's just education that's lacking. So we know that we are self-repairing. If you've got all the materials, the vitamins and minerals, as you say, the essential fats, the oils, the enzymes, the probiotics. If we've got all the things we need to thrive, we self-repair. And at the end of life, what happens at the end of life is you've got a choice. You either die of literal old age, where you go to sleep peacefully one night, happy and healthy, and the next morning you don't wake up. Okay, that would be a nice way to go, quietly in your sleep. But most people die of an osis or an itis. Any medical condition with an itis in the end is inflammatory, and any medical condition like sclerosis that's got an osis at the end is a buildup of scar tissue. So what we want to try and achieve, if we're eating super healthily, is to be able to repair scar tissue and not actually accumulate it. Most people with blocked arteries and stuff, they've accumulated so much scar tissue, fibroids, cysts. If you imagine that the body repairs with scar tissue, which is a bit like a sort of spider's web, holding your weak arteries together or whatever it might be. So if you can find something that will stop scar tissue forming, and if you can find something that reduced inflammation and pain, well, that would sound like an ideal supplement, if it existed, which it does, that would help people. So let's look at children. What are young children really good at? Well, what they're really good at is bouncing. They fall over flat on their faces all the time and injure themselves. But so long as the parents don't panic, they're getting right up and running around again, happy as Larry. So that child might have sprained their ankle, which if you or I sprained our ankle, well, that might knock us out for days, conceivably. But they repair in 5 or 10 minutes. How is that possible? How children do it, young children do it, is they have an abundance of proteolytic enzymes. So proteolytic enzymes are the enzymes that stop pain and inflammation in the body, and they stop scar tissue because the body can just rebuild properly, assuming the child has decent nutrition to be able to repair virtually instantly. But as we get older, obviously, just like we make less of everything as we age, we make less of these proteolytic enzymes. And so people often ask me, well, what's the most important stuff around? Is it vitamin C? Is it magnesium? What are the important things? And one can't narrow it down to just one thing, but there are a few that you could count on two hands that are absolutely life-changing once you understand how simple the explanation of why these things work. Like with proteolytic enzymes, it's not hard to understand, and good examples are silkworms. How the proteolytic enzyme that I've got on my website was discovered by Japanese scientists some 30 odd years ago, and they were studying silkworms. So the worm encapsulates itself in the pupae, this sort of shell thing, and it's as hard as rock. You might need a hammer to try and break it open. So it's totally protected against predators. The risk is coming out. So if it comes out really slowly, then something could be waiting there, waiting to eat it. But the Japanese scientists realized that it took seconds, just a few seconds, and the silk moth was flying away. And they wanted to know what the material was that the silk moth was producing to dissolve this rock hard surrounding. And it was a bacteria. And so they realized that this bacteria ate protein, but specifically foreign protein. I mean, we're made up of protein, right? But it won't eat us. It'll eat what it perceives as foreign protein. So a cyst, fibroids, scars, inflammatory conditions, that's what it sees as foreign protein. And it's an amazingly interesting material. And I would say, well, I used to interview people over the years and say, look, what do you think is most important? And probably more people said digestive enzymes than anything else. The difference between the proteolytic enzyme and the digestive enzymes are, if let's say you wanted to eat a steak, but you were elderly, you couldn't digest food and really get the goodness out of eating a steak. So if you took a proteolytic enzyme at the same time as you ate the steak, it would sort of virtually dissolve it. And for old people, digestive enzymes are incredibly useful. And again, on the site, I've got a blend of them. So people, there are specific ones, not on my site, but you can get specific ones for people who are lactose intolerant. So suddenly their body is able to digest lactose if they have to. And there are ones for carbohydrates and so on. But of course, we make them in our body. I mean, if people have problems digesting carbohydrates, one of the tricks is to chew more, because enzymes are created in different parts of the body. But when you're digesting carbohydrates, they're created in the mouth. So the more you chew anything that's carbohydrate, the better you'll digest it.
So let me ask you, with the different types of enzymes, like protogenic enzymes, are there any foods that are out there in our supermarket or in our own gardens that we can grow that would contain some sort of enzymes? And again, when you're talking about digestive enzymes as well, what types of foods would help us lean toward that? Because, knowing where we're going to go with the inavailability of some foods, and it's going to be the seasonality of foods that's going to be really affected. For example, in the States, you can get strawberries in the middle of January, which is completely out of season. They're imported from the other hemisphere. But when we start to see supply chains constrict even more, and we really do get back down to seasonality, well, what's grown in this season is what you get. Okay, we get pumpkins in the fall, we get apples in the fall, that's great. But can we grow something through the year, even in our own grow bags or gardens or indoor protected greenhouses, that sort of thing, that would contain either of those two enzymes?
Well,
Types of enzymes.
There's a range of foods that are famous for their enzymatic qualities. Pineapple, for instance, breaks down lots of foods. Papaya does the same sort of thing, and bromelain and papain are the enzymes that if the people who've got digestive enzymes, they'll recognize those too. There are things like beetroot. Let's say you had apples and you made apple cider vinegar. That's a digestive enzyme. Anybody who gets acid reflux, anybody who's told that they're making too much stomach acid, it is likely the opposite. And by taking apple cider vinegar, a tablespoonful or two in some water, half an hour before eating, they may find that their acid reflux and their bloating, it becomes a thing of the past within one meal. So digestive enzymes are definitely worth looking at. But the difference between a digestive enzyme to break down food is different to the proteolytic enzyme use that I'm suggesting. So you'd want to take, if you want to break down, tumors and fibroids and stuff, you want to take it at least 2 hours after you've last eaten. So instead of digesting the food, it's now digesting your foreign proteins. Interestingly, it's illegal. This particular one is illegal in Europe, right? And it's going to work when they don't want you to have it.
Imagine that. And then I'm just curious your thoughts on using baking soda for some of the same. You could have this debate all along, too acidic, or, can you balance your alkalinity? I mean, what are your thoughts on baking soda? Because I'm seeing in a lot of, prepper websites currently, get baking soda. It's, obviously for the wounds and for different types of things like this, washing vegetables, etc. But also there's a lot of recommendations of using a teaspoon or whatever, quarter teaspoon in water for something of the same effect to, cancels out some of that heartburn, just as a quick, easy remedy. I mean, Tums is made pretty much.
It's the wrong remedy. It is the incorrect remedy. They've taken the mainstream explanation of bicarb. So I can explain it so everybody will understand. Bicarb is alkaline, therefore it'll turn off stomach acid or any type of acid that's in the stomach. You see, so somebody who's having what they think is too much stomach acid, it isn't too much stomach acid. It's probably too much lactic acid, not stomach acid. So when it's got their burning in the throat, it's usually a lack of magnesium, because if you're low on magnesium, the valve at the top of the throat doesn't work properly. But by using apple cider vinegar half an hour before a meal, they add extra acidity and their body can start to work properly again. It's not that people need to take something like apple cider vinegar forever, and you want the organic, raw, unpasteurized stuff, obviously. But you can use other materials. I mean, stomach acid is hydrochloric acid, like 3 or 4% hydrochloric acid. And they actually sell online hydrochloric acid tablets that you take with a meal. You can use betaine, which is a beetroot extract, betaine like beetroot, and that also provides more stomach acid for better digestion. So, people with poor digestion, almost certainly they're not making enough stomach acid. And so digestive enzymes often have betaine in them or similar materials. I mean, I think everybody over, let's say, 50 or something like that would almost certainly increase their lifespan if they were getting the most out of the food that they're eating. But the reality is most people are poisoning themselves with the food they're eating because they haven't chosen organic.
Now, I stumbled across an article here just this morning that says the UK is going to experience energy poverty because just as the status quo to heat your home as you did last year, it's going to cost you, I guess, 1,100 pounds more this year because of inflation built into it. So at the people who aren't making very much money are going to have to really make some choices of heating or eating. And there's a new term for it called energy poverty. And that was specifically based in the UK. So seems like everybody's getting hit from every end. And then if you can't afford your own basic heating, are you going to be able to afford to go to the doctor and, get prescriptions and buy that? I know it's socialized healthcare there, but still there's some cost involved.
Well, in Germany, they're already rationing diesel.
Mm.
So that's a straight knock on to agriculture. Do you know what happened in Cuba when the Soviet Union collapsed and they knew that they only had 12 weeks of oil left? Do you know that story?
I'm a little familiar with Cuba, the way they revamped agriculture, but I didn't know the lead up to that.
It's incredible. So overnight, pretty much, they get the telephone call from the Soviet Union. That's the end. We can't support you anymore. And so they had a few weeks to prepare for what that meant. So that meant no more oil no more diesel for the tractors, couldn't get the products into the cities. And they ripped up the paving stones in Havana and other places and started growing like mad because they knew what was coming. So on average, everybody in Havana lost 20 pounds. Everybody in Cuba lost 20 pounds in weight on average, as basically they starved. They fed the tourists, but they were forced to switch over to natural agriculture, permaculture systems, and so on, because there was no nitrogen fertilizer coming. And of course, adapting from nitrogen to organic is a tricky thing to do fast. And so there's a wonderful story called Peak Oil, Cuba. I can't remember the full title, but it's Cuba Peak Oil. And they interview the people who are at the forefront of coping with this imminent, possible catastrophe, and how they did it, and how the entire country basically went organic.
Hard to build soils in 12 weeks to get yield out of there.
It's not easy. However, I had an organic farm for years, and we used various nitrogen fixing materials, which worked very well. But that you've got to wait a year.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're up against here with the nitrogen fertilizer shortages, the inbound. There's so many shortages that are showing to be inbound right now with farm inputs. Yeah. So, can we switch over quickly? Nope, not a chance. And how many people know how to grow their food? Most everybody has forgotten because they're relying on a system now. So,
and even if they knew, it's not easy.
No, I grow my own food out here. Do you know how many losses and things I learned to do better over the last year and a half? Going full gardens, there's an enormous amount of production if you do it correctly. In the summertime, you're going to get an abundance. Then you need to learn how to store it and keep the nutrients intact. But most people, I don't think, are ready for getting up and doing that much kind of work. Can you imagine how many muscle pulls and sprains there's going to be in the first weeks of people trying to dig and shovel and move heavy things and pick up buckets? They're going to be just like, I don't want to live through this. They're really going to check out. A lot of them, it's going to be too difficult. The work itself, the physical labor.
And most of the knowledge is at the end of extinction, in the sense of, my farm is in Spain, and one day there was an explosion of insects coming out of holes in the ground. So I had an original, really old guy who'd been running the farm for 30 years prior to me. And he said, oh, well, that's easy. And we were growing olives, so we had olive oil. And he said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to drop olive oil in every single hole, everywhere on the farm. And that was how to deal with it. But I mean, most people would never guess that that's the way to deal with this particular predator, because it could have wiped us out. But olive oil, I had a horse at one point which somehow had ripped itself, big gash on its side, and I didn't know what to do. And the same old guy said, oh, just rub olive oil in it. And within a day, it was massively better. The flies stopped. It was olive oil, magic stuff.
Yeah, and those are the kind of things I wanted to talk about, especially, cold pressed virgin olive oil. And I know it's not the greatest for cooking, flash point, heat point, etc. But now one thing we noticed last year was, in the garden, if it's not netted, you're going to get an enormous amount of, slugs and caterpillars and just eggs under the insides of, leaves. And if people don't have access to a lot of water or very clean water, then to try to, rinse that off and then cook it. And there's a whole gamut of things to think of with fresh veg coming out of your own garden, especially if there's just, natural cycle of nature included into it. How many times we've either scraped eggs off or ripped that part of the leaf off and then thrown it away because we just didn't want to clean it or have a chance on a slug or something like this getting ingested. Even a tiny slug is going to create some health problems for you. So baking soda and water, here we are.
Right, ozone. There are two types of ozone generator out there. There's the $25 ozone generator. And if you got a bowl of water and you had strawberries or lettuce or meat or fish, anything that you felt might have a poison in some way in it, you can put it in the water, the strawberries in the water, bubble ozone through it for a few minutes, and all the surface chemicals will be neutralized. But you can't breathe a lot of it. If I'm running an ozone generator, I might have it near an open window by a cooker hood because ozone's a little bit irritating.
Because I'm trying to boil it down. People are behind the 8 ball right now. The news awareness is coming out that they need to get prepped out. And suddenly they're just going how do we even start? Okay, taking a look at your seed stock, et cetera, and what kind of seeds you want to grow. But another thing is what's available in the stores that's pretty easy to find that you consider the most critical moving through these times. If supply chains really do break down and there's digital rationing cards issued and you're only allowed to get a certain amount, well, what would you buy now that you think is the most critical for anybody in the homes, the families, in terms of foods and nutrition and devices like you talked here, the ozone generator? And I'm curious, what's that on your back left over there with the looks like silver in the black case? I see a.
Yes, that's the Tesla device. People don't know that Nikola Tesla invented healing devices.
I have the autobiography of Nikola Tesla sitting right over there. I'm wondering.
Now, it depends which one. There are two out there. There's a real one and a fake where he says JP Morgan was the best thing out. And there's another one where he doesn't say that.
No, this is the one where he definitely talks about how Edison also had taken advantage of him. And then when he came to collect after inventing the light bulb, he goes, "Oh, it was a joke, old boy. Didn't you know American humor?" And he goes through the whole story of how he got shafted by Edison as well. That's the book I have.
So I've got almost all Tesla's writings, I think. Not that I've had a chance to read the vast majority of them. So when we were at AV10, I had a really big Tesla device with me then. Did you see that?
You were so busy, and I was my first time being there and, trying to meet different people. So I cannot remember seeing it or referencing it. No.
So
you had a crowd around you then too. As soon as you stop, whoa, she's movie star style, and everybody there was like, climb,
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm over here, David, new guy, I forget him,
Well, no, you were attracting people as well. I think that it's just talking about grand solar minimums, it gets people a bit worried.
Well, they should be. It's coming home to roost this year. I do believe, in all honesty, that this year is the year that our civilization starts to shatter because of non-available foods, economic declines, and just people's response. This interplanetary magnetic field continues to shift, and the outer planets are showing signs. Pluto's atmosphere collapsed and Neptune's atmosphere reversed. And they just have these bevy of news articles on how this massive swing shift in cooling temperatures on Neptune, and then the X-ray flares off Uranus that are seen with the naked eye, minerals glowing with auroras on Mars, and then our atmosphere is starting to behave strangely now. So these electromagnetic effects sweeping through the solar system, all the way from the sun to the outer planets and beyond, it seems to go lockstep where there's more government control, or dripping in more fear to try to maybe counteract that intuitiveness, or that whatever's happening with our perception, to plug it in. Like you talk about chlorine molecules and fluorine molecules being so much smaller that plug into iodine receptors. But think about that too. Fear might plug into something that should be filled with intuitiveness, perhaps. I don't know. I'm trying to make a correlation there.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. And of course, fear is their favorite weapon because it's free. Yeah.
I'm just trying to talk more about solutions, because obviously we can identify the problem like a million times over going through the news in any one day. Obviously there's a problem. But then what do people need for the solutions? Because they can get their fill of news every day, but not a lot of people are talking about nutrition as your food gets double and triple price, or just simply not available. And how are going to people adjust to seasonal diets where they can't get what they're used to? Are people going to have withdrawals from eating the foods that they're used to eating? And, how do they substitute? And
which is more addictive, heroin or sugar, heroin or wheat? I think they're probably on a bit of a par, So, I mean, if it really came down to it, I would want to have a store of seeds and beans and chickpeas, lentils, because if I wanted fresh veg, right, fresh salad, I could be sprouting mung beans, turning them into bean sprouts. If I wanted a Chinesey sort of meal, you get 1 pound of lentils, say, and you sprout them. You brought them back to life from dormant possibility to vibrant life. So you probably up the vitamin and mineral content by 20, 50 times, who knows, just by bringing it alive. And now, instead of it weighing 1 pound as you brought it home, it's now weighing 2, 3, or 4 pounds in weight. So your food has got maybe to a quarter of the price that it was if you just taken lentils before sprouting them. And sprouting, as I'm sure you know, is so easy. And you don't need a garden. I mean, there are a few gardening tricks that I really like. I mean, one of them is to use potatoes. Now, while potatoes are hardly the most wonderful food in the world, nevertheless, they're great gardeners, because if somebody's got lawn and they try to dig it and the fork just bounces off because it's rock hard, put a layer of potatoes down, put some cardboard on top with holes cut out where the potatoes are, put 2 feet of straw on top, water it. The roots of the potatoes will break up the soil, making it quite friable. And when you come a couple of months later to start harvesting the potatoes, move the straw aside, and there they are right on top. You hardly have to dig. And for next year, now your soil's prepared. There are so many tricks. I mean, I like the Japanese, no-dig gardening idea. So there are so many ways where you don't have to disturb the soil, because, as you know, the moment you take the soil covering off, you've damaged it. If you can grow straight through the existing protective layer, then huge benefits to that.